Bloons tower defense history has just been made in both the 6th game and now BTD5 as well, as on the 9th of January 2025, Super Blooner 1 would complete this absolutely historic run that made it all the way to round 4,115, which is really significant because it beats the previous record by over 1,100 rounds. And the craziest part? This might not even be that close to the true limit of what's ultimately possible in this game. So, how exactly did we get here? And beyond that, just how much further can BTD5 actually be pushed? Well, only time will answer that second question, but as for the first, we have to go all the way back to December of 2011, when BTD5 was first released. Already, there was a player by the name of Halebop who was regularly pushing to high rounds. In fact, before the new year, he had already gotten to around 200, but unfortunately, a video of that run no longer exists. However, what we do have is the run I'm showing you currently, which is actually a tutorial he posted on how to get to round 200 and beyond in this game all the way back on January 4th of 2012. And if we take a look at the video's description, it becomes pretty clear that Halebop was simply ahead of his time. He was one of, if not the first player to realize that the Monkey Temple is the strongest tower in the game compared to the amount of space it takes up, and he had already figured out which towers to sacrifice to it in order to create the strongest temple possible. I think we all owe this player, rather this BTD5 legend, some real credit for pretty much being the first person to test the limits of Bloons Tower Defense 5. Now in this video, he was playing on the beginner map Monkey Lane and using easy difficulty. However, just 6 days later, on January 10th, Halebop would post another video, and this one is pretty crazy. It's also a round 200 tutorial, only this time he's doing it on hard difficulty and he's playing on an expert map known as Clock as well. And as you can see, his defense isn't getting particularly close to losing either, so who knows just how far it could have actually survived. However, there is something very important to note here. It appears that in early 2012, BTD5 Freeplay didn't actually have the same ramping that it does today, where Moab class balloons gain extra health, and all balloons, including the Moab class, gain extra speed every single round once you enter Freeplay mode. And it's hard to tell exactly when this was added, but I believe it would have most likely been on March 22nd of 2012 when the game had an update that came with major balance changes. And while you might think that this is the reason Halebop could get so far, pretty soon you're going to see that the addition of Freeplay ramping was far from being enough to actually stop our boy. Now by February 26th, he had pushed his record all the way up to around 270, this time being played on Monkey Lane, but he was still using hard difficulty. And at the end of his run, you can actually see that this was first place for Monkey Lane on hard difficulty, and given how popular the map is, and the fact that there were only 21 tracks in BTD5 at this time, we can probably assume this was the overall record for hard difficulty as well. However, when we check out the description, there is a really important note, which is that with the newest update in BTD5, which would have happened 2 days before this video was posted, you could no longer place towers on the base of a monkey temple, which remains true until this very day. Maybe this was also the update that added Freeplay ramping, not the one on March 22nd, but Halebop makes no mention of that anywhere in the video's description. However, Halebop also said something else that's really interesting here as well, which is that unless Ninja Kiwi allows towers to be placed on the base of a temple again, it's not likely any new records will be set. Of course, in the context of this video, we all know that's certainly not the case, but what's really interesting is that Halebop himself managed to push the record all the way to round 401 by just April of 2012. And it looks like over the past few months, the strategy had changed quite a good bit as well, with the Moab Mullers and Ray of Dooms being dropped for technological terrors and spike storms. I also know that on March 22nd, the Energy Beacon Village was added to the game as well, which you might be able to see attacking the balloons amongst all the chaos that's going on. And I'm not sure what other upgrades had been added to the game since February, but clearly, round 270 was far from being the true limit. Apparently, this run also took at least 3 days to complete, which probably sounds insane right now, but by the end of this video, you might not be so impressed by that number. In any case, the second half of 2012 would actually see Halebop get some competition, with S2LT setting a record of around 446 on an unknown date in 2012, which unfortunately doesn't have an existing video. But in doing research for my video, I found something pretty interesting, which is a post on a website called Record Setter that claims someone named Tim J got to round 446, which they're calling a record on their website, but there's just one problem. They claim the record was set June 28th of 2014, which is impossible because there are 12-year-old comments on this record submission, and I'm recording this on January of 2025. So I think it's very possible that Tim J is actually the same guy as S2LT, and this is the record he had actually set back in 2012. But what we can verify is that on November 11th of 2012, a player by the name of Bloons would beat this record by exactly 1 round. And he literally sold all of his defense after beating round 447, so it's pretty obvious he could have gone even further if he had wanted to. Halebop would actually take his record back with round 452 on an unknown date in 2012, which unfortunately doesn't have an existing video. And then, things would go really quiet, with no new records being set for over a year, before a player named Big Cube Fan became the first person to ever reach round 500 on December 5th of 2013. And remember how I just said it took Halebop 3 days to reach round 400? Well, this run took 26, with round 500 alone lasting for 2 hours. So, this is where a bottleneck really started to form as to what was actually possible in BTD5, especially considering the fact that Big Cube Fan actually had his game crash on round 501 as well. And the thing is, you couldn't save your game once you entered free play mode either, so once the game crashed, that was it. Your run would be lost. Not to mention the fact that this also meant you could never close BTD5 either. So when you're talking about a 26-day run, that starts becoming a bit of an issue. So, with all of that in mind, BTD5 was seemingly pretty close to reaching its limit. On March 27th of 2014, Marche would increase the record up to round 512, and it's important to note, unlike Big Cube Fan, he actually played on hard difficulty as opposed to easy, which might have actually been a good thing, as in the video's description, Marche said that the rounds were taking him roughly 45 minutes each instead of the 2 hours it took for Big Cube Fan on round 500. So maybe the extra balloon speed from hard mode was able to help the rounds go more quickly. Or maybe not, as the next record of round 574, set by the Lapras Man on November 7th of 2014, would be played on easy mode again, and according to the description, he was able to reach round 551 just 12 days into the game. And, just like for Big Cube Fan, the Lapras Man would have his game crash as well, so at this point, it really seemed like the only way to get further would simply be to get lucky with your own game not crashing before round 576. But you see, less than 2 weeks after this run was completed, something would happen to BTD5 that would change the course of high score runs forever. That's because on November 19th of 2014, BTD5 was officially ported to Steam. You see, up to this point, the version of BTD5 we've been covering was coded on a programming language known as Flash, which certainly has some limitations. However, the Steam version was coded on C++, the same language that's used for the Bedrock version of Minecraft. So needless to say, there is a lot more possible for a game that's coded in this language as opposed to Flash, which was used to create simple, free games online. Now it's important to note, BTD5 was already made available on the iOS App Store 2 years prior, on November 15th of 2012, but given the state of smartphones back then, it's fair to assume that reaching round 500 would have been just as hard on mobile as it was on the Flash version. However, now that there was a more optimized version of BTD5 available on PC, the Lapras Man would quickly take advantage of this opportunity as he pushed the record all the way up to round 1000 on May 23rd of 2015. And the advantage was immediately obvious, as it now took him less than 2 days to get to round 500, and the entire run itself took around 2 weeks. Additionally, rounds started taking over 10 minutes to complete near the 1000 mark, which is still a lot better than 45 minutes or 2 hours for a single round on the Flash version when you've only gotten halfway as far. The game also didn't crash once he beat round 1000 either. The Lapras Man simply decided to sell all of his defense and end the run himself, noting in the description that he could have easily gotten past round 1100 with his current defense. Of course, not everything was perfect with the Steam version of BTD5, as Lapras also notes that eventually, the game would experience something called ability lag, where you actually get locked out of being able to use your special abilities for a long time, usually until after the current round ends. This is a problem that has become less prevalent today, as PCs have gotten better, but it continues affecting the Steam and mobile versions of the game. Of course, with the activated abilities Absolute Zero and Bloons Sabotage, you can significantly slow down all Bloons, including the Moab class, all the way up to 0 MGs, which gives your tower significantly more time to deal damage, and the Lapras man believed even back in May of 2015 that you could get to around 1500 if the game didn't experience ability lag. Now, this version of BTD5 wasn't just better for setting records because it wouldn't crash anymore, but rather, the game also got some new towers, which allows you to build a stronger defense, and it even introduced a major glitch that is going to become very important in just a second. But for his round 1000 run, the Lapras man did not use any glitches. Rather, he relied on the most broken tower in BTD history, the Bloon Chipper, which of course doesn't exist on the regular Flash version. The reason that this tower is so good is that when upgraded to the 4th tier on the left path, it can suck in any Bloon, including a 0 MG, and hold it in place while the temples are able to destroy it. This would be like having a relatively cheap tower in BTD6 that could just casually hold a bad Bloon in place indefinitely, so yeah, needless to say, every record going forward is going to be using this tower. This version of BTD5 also features a better version of the map Express Shipping, which is also the longest map on the Flash version. However, in that one, towers can only be placed directly on top of crates instead of anywhere on the map, which is why it wasn't used there. Instead, it had actually been discovered by the time Lapras man set his record that 3 times around is actually the best map for Flash. But considering the fact that Express Shipping is over twice as long as that map, with it now being a viable option on Steam, that of course made it even better. Additionally, you could now place towers around the base of a temple again, which hadn't been possible on Flash since early 2012. Which of course gives you more space to place towers regardless of the map you're playing on. But that glitch I had just been talking about was going to allow for something that had never been possible before, which is for monkey temples to have other temples sitting on their base. You see, when you create a monkey temple in BTD5 or 6, it sacrifices every tower within its range. So naturally, you can only fit so many temples on a map without having one temple sacrifice another. For example, when Lapras got to round 1000, he had managed to fit 12 temples, although it is certainly possible to fit more with better placements. But everything was changed on July 3rd of 2015 when the temple glitch would be exposed in a major way by none other than the Bloons YouTuber Super John Bombo, who used to be a BTD5 player before the 6th game came out. And even back when he posted this video in 2015, SJB already had over 200,000 subscribers, with this video getting 500,000 views. The reason this glitch is exclusive to the mobile and Steam version of BTD5 is because it uses an ability that you get from the helicopter, which allows it to move a tower from one spot to another and takes advantage of this ability to actually move the super monkeys around as they're being upgraded in order to get temples as close to each other as possible. And if you didn't know, the helicopter is not a tower that's available in the Flash version of the game. Now, needless to say, SJB had a whole lot more than 12 temples for his run, which interestingly, actually failed to exactly round 1001 without him even selling any of his defense. But he had been playing on the map Lobby, so naturally, on September 18th of 2015, the Lapras man would use this glitch to get all the way to around 1500 on Express Shipping, with him not getting very close to failing either. And over the next couple months, there were a couple people that managed to get past round 1000 without using the temple glitch, but nobody would beat round 1500 until Ada got to round 1700 on November 16th of 2015. Which also used temple stacking. So, it would seem that now, the strategy for BTD5 records had truly been optimized. You play on the Steam version of the game, choose the map Express Shipping, and stack as many temples as you can on top of each other, and then you fill the rest of the space up with Bloon chippers. And sure enough, this would be reflected by the fact that Ada's record stood for the rest of 2015, all of 2016, and by 2017, the only interesting thing that had happened was a player who managed to get all the way to around 1240 without temple stacking, and they played on the PS4 version of BTD5, which is the only time that the glitchless record, or any record for that matter, has been held on that version of the game. Although in 2018, things started to get a bit more interesting when a player by the name of Cruel Tricks managed to get to around 1496 without any glitches, although we only have this screenshot of it from a discussion about high scores that started in 2015 on a Steam thread. But nearly 2 years after Cruel Tricks set this record, on February 1st of 2020, the current record holder, Super Blooner 1, would actually make his first appearance by becoming the first person to reach round 1,500 exactly without any glitches. However, there was something very major that most players had been overlooking up to this point. You see, the helicopter really is an all-star of record-setting runs here in BTD5, as it not only has the ability to move towers with its 4th tier upgrade on the right path, but it also gains the ability to generate crates filled with extra cash and extra lives as well. And on the 4th of November in 2020, something truly miraculous would happen, when a player by the name of Jort would completely redefine the way that high scores were achieved in this game, as he managed to, get this, make it all the way to around 2,728 without the temple stacking glitch. So how did he do it? Well, amongst his defense, Jort included some helicopters that he had constantly using their supply crate abilities in order to gain extra lives while the game was going on. And since the gameplay will last for hundreds of hours once you start going this far, he was able to surpass 30 million lives by the round 1,887 mark. Before this record, when people would lose, they weren't leaking entire ZOMGs, because the balloon shippers wouldn't let those escape. Instead, it was all the smaller stuff like ceramic balloons that would start to get through, which might only take a couple thousand lives or so at first. Thus, with millions of extra lives, Jort could afford to begin tanking those rounds very comfortably, and of course, as he got further and further, he would have begun bleeding lives more quickly as the balloons continued getting faster and stronger, but needless to say, life farming with the helicopter was really the key to pushing BTD5's late game to the next level. And sure enough, the next record that was set, which didn't come until over 2.5 years later, on June 27th of 2023, managed to reach round 3,000 without temple stacking either. This time, the person apparently farmed over 300 million lives, but all we really have are a couple screenshots unfortunately. However, to get that many extra lives, they must have used a new strategy for life farming, where you use the pro version of this special agent called the Banana Farmer, which, in addition to collecting bananas in crates for you, can also spit banana peels onto the track, which will send balloons backwards without actually damaging them. This allows you to infinitely stall around, or at least almost infinitely, as the farmer will actually crash the game eventually after about a week or so if you don't eventually end the round. This is the same strategy that was used by our current record holder, Super Blooner 1, in order to get to 250 million lives by just round 35. But how was this possibly enough to get an extra 1,114 rounds if the previous record holder supposedly farmed all the way to 300 million? Well, Super Blooner 1, also known as Matteo, was the first person to ever successfully combine excessive life farming with the temple stacking. You see, it's pretty easy for the temple glitch to actually crash the game, so other people had tried to combine the two of them before, but they either gave up or managed to literally brick their save files. It's also really important to note that if we go back to the one record that was ever set on the PS4 back in 2017, the description of that video mentions how they could have gotten further if they had used the helicopter to farm extra lives, which just goes to show that people were aware of these things for a long time, but it took a truly special person to actually see the new strategies all the way through. And that is exactly what we have just gotten with Matteo's run. Now, it's really important to note, amongst all the advantages that come with the Steam and mobile versions of BTD5, is the fact that you can now save your game once you've entered free play mode, which was never possible in the Flash version. And this version of the game even auto-saves for you every single round, so if you ever need to close BTD5 or the game does happen to actually crash, your run will have been saved on the last round that you successfully completed. And this is really important, because we've actually reached the point where Steam records now take longer to set than records on Flash do, even with how much faster the Steam version runs. For example, the longest record we covered from Flash, Big Cube Fan's round 500 run, took him 26 days. However, Matteo started farming extra lives on August 7th of 2024 and reportedly spent an entire month doing this before he actually got bored and decided to quit the run for a while. Keep in mind, that was 1 month just to farm the 250 million extra lives that he used for his run. And once he came back to it on December 7th, Matteo began setting up a worthy defense, which mainly consisted of a bunch of stacked temples along with balloon shippers in the upper left corner. In the rest of the space, he filled in more helicopters in order to farm some extra lives while the game was actually going, the same way that Jort did back in 2020. This allowed Matteo to ultimately reach just under 272 million lives by round 244 when he now had his defense fully set up. And from here, all there really was to do for him is simply be patient and hope that the temple stacking glitch doesn't end up messing up his save file anywhere down the line. And by round 2525, it was pretty clear that this run truly had the potential to be something special. Not only was Matteo getting pretty close to the round 3000 record now, but the reason I pointed out 2525 specifically is because this is actually when Matteo began to first start losing lives. And for reference, by round 2500, Jort had already lost millions upon millions of lives, whereas from round 2525 to 2730, Matteo lost less than a million. These were the same rounds that entirely ended Jort's run at 2,729. So finally, we were getting to see the true power of a run where both major late game strategies had come together. And on December 25th of 2024, Matteo would officially become the new world record holder by surpassing the round 3000 mark. And honestly, I don't think anyone would have blamed him if he had stopped shortly after that. But being a true man of conviction, Matteo would run his computer 24 hours a day, and on January 6th, he reached the incredible mark of round 4000, with over 39 million lives still to his name. And it makes sense that this took so long, because with the rounds taking about 15 minutes apiece, you're limited to about 100 rounds of progress per day at the very most. Nothing highlights this better than the fact that this screenshot of round 4100 was sent a full 5 hours and 20 minutes before this screenshot where Matteo had finally lost to round 4115. In doing so, setting an incredible record that surely should be able to stand the test of time, at least for the next few years, right? Well, remember when I said how this record might not even be close to the true limit of BTD5? You might be thinking, that doesn't really make any sense, because realistically, what else is there left to do? Well, who said that Matteo had to stop farming lives when he got to 250 million? You see, the truth is, the game allows you to go a whole lot further than that. In fact, he could have kept going all the way until reaching the signed 32-bit integer limit of 2,147,483,647 lives. Although it'd be smart to stop a bit short of this exact number, as the way a signed integer works is that the first bit represents whether the number is positive or negative, and going over the maximum value it can store actually flips the first bit, which then makes the entire number negative. I'm not exactly sure what would happen in BTD5 if you did that, but I feel like there's a chance it might brick your save file or something, so definitely not a risk worth taking. But considering that it did take Matteo a full month just to farm 250 million lives, there's probably not anyone who's actually crazy enough to really push it all the way to the integer limit, right? I mean, maybe someone will go for 500 million one day, but even that, I can see taking quite... So yeah. As it turns out, before Matteo even began his run, Jort had already been working on getting to the integer limit with his own life farming. And you can see, he actually has a really clever setup in order to be able to get the farm working even on round 95, which is already free play mode. And in this video that's a bit over a week old now, where he was testing just how much ability lag the overclock adds, Jort was already nearing round 1800. And you might also notice he still isn't using temple stacking. Now I know what you're thinking, but Matteo himself has said that he believes Jort will still make it to round 5000 just from having the most lives possible. And considering my highest round in the game is only 1008, I'm certainly not going to question his math. And keep in mind, Jort is the same guy who beat the glitched record by over 1,000 rounds without glitches back in 2020. So I wouldn't put it past him to do it again. Of course, even if he does get past round 5000, Jort's run still won't be the ultimate limit of the game if it doesn't have temple stacking in it. So we can only really theorize how far a person could get with both strategies together, at least for the time being. But you know what's funny? There is actually a glitch that is at least twice as powerful as regular temple stacking, and while it's never been used for a record run, that would open the door to somebody going even further than what we already imagined was possible. Although I would imagine that the game becomes less stable with a glitch that's that powerful. So who knows if we'll ever even see it make its way into a record run. But what we do know is that somehow, round 4114 still isn't the end of the story for BTD5. I guess that's why Ninja Kiwi made it so much harder to go ultra late game in BTD6.